The following consists of a series of quotes and rants I had jotted in my copy of Mere Christianity that I feel paints an important picture derived from the incredibly valid points that Lewis makes. For starters, on page 47, Lewis states, quote, Christians, then, should believe that an evil power has made himself for the present the prince of this world, unquote. And this truth is utterly apparent if only one opens their eyes to their own willful naivety derived from their selfish seekings of self-preservation. Because we have literally been fighting a war of millennia amongst ourselves, contradicting our inherent decency in perpetual seekings of triumph, thus superiority over our peers, yet we pretend we aren't. Our corrupt and misguided leaders, political leaders, church leaders, general social leaders, etc., perpetually failing to acknowledge, intentionally deflecting and denying that earth is owned by the darkness because it is the truth that exposes they themselves as the lost crooks they in fact are, the 10-to-1, whilst everyone else, out of fear of our own flaws, pitfalls, shortcomings, and wrongdoings coming to light, and through worship of these same deceptive leaders, pretend this isn't the truth. We do nothing because, as much as these leaders wish not to admit they have fallen, we ourselves also wish not to admit that we have fallen, as we blindly take after their example. Thus, our free will being our greatest strength, yet also our greatest weakness. On page 48, Lewis states, quote, if a thing is free to be good, it is also free to be bad. And free will is what made evil possible. Why, then, did God give them free will? Because free will, though it makes evil possible, is also the only thing that makes possible any love or goodness or joy worth having. A world automata, creatures that work like machines, would hardly be worth creating. The happiness which God designs for his higher creatures is the happiness of being freely, voluntarily united to him in ecstasy of love and delight, compared with the most rapturous of love between a man and a woman on this earth is mere milk and water. And for that, they must be free, unquote. Free will, the gift most humans are abusing, taking pride in being adaptable. But why is adaptable a good thing? In this instance, in a world owned by evil intention, it shouldn't be, because it goes hand in hand with selfish seekings of self-preservation, conforming to a tainted status quo, thus harboring dark, evil traits through seeking unanimity with the world owned by the darkness, embodying this fight for triumph, thus superiority through things like fighting despicably over who's the biggest asshole, who's the wittiest thinker, who's the biggest tough guy, who's the most dominant or alpha, who's the biggest con man, the best bullshitter, who's the holder of the most trivial knowledge, who's the richest, who's the most successful, and so forth. The world has got its aspirations so wrong, misguided and led astray by the overprevalent example being set by the social leaders of our present status quo, teaching us to seek triumph and to worship the material things, idol worship, we come to possess, making us the acting agents of the darkness, worshiping the darkness through our actions and selfish intentions by being active participants in the world it has created, participants in its game of triumph. Lo and behold, our perpetual seekings of triumph, our perpetual seekings of superiority over our peers in whatever way we can cling on to it, rather than seeking team unity and harmony under the flag of love and light, and embodying genuine compassion, tolerance, and acceptance of all walks of life, particularly those perceptibly less fortunate than us. On page 49, Lewis states, quote, the moment you have self at all, there is a possibility of putting yourself first, wanting to be the center, wanting to be God, in fact. That was the sin of Satan, and that was the sin he taught the human race. What Satan put in the heads of our remote ancestors was the idea that they could be like gods, could set up their own as if they had created themselves, be their own masters, invent some sort of happiness for themselves outside of God, apart from God. And out of that hopeless attempt has come nearly all that we call human history: money, poverty, ambition, prostitution, classes, empires, slavery. The long, terrible story of man trying to find something other than God, which may make them happy." Unquote. And is this not the perfect depiction of the human condition, or at least one of them? Egocentrism. Envy and jealousy turn spite and resentment, inflated by the darkness-owned status quo's teachings of seeking triumph and superiority of self over all others, rooted in ignorance and arrogance through the boasting of hypocrisy, prejudice, superficiality, duplicity, selfishness, and self-indulgence, with intentions, goals, and aspirations in all the wrong places, instead seekings of triumph of self, whilst deflecting and denying the pains, the disappointments, and dissatisfactions that led one down this path of darkness towards such tainted and selfish goals and aspirations. The epitome of the last humans who deserve power and authority, yet the statement of nearly everyone who presently has it. On page 50, Lewis states, quote, "The reason why it could never succeed is this: God made us, invented us as a man invents an engine. A car is made to run on petrol, and it would not properly run on anything else. Now God designed the human machine to run on himself. He himself is the fuel our spirits were designed to feed on. There is no other. That is why it is just no good asking God to make us happy in our own way without bothering about religion, spirituality. God cannot give us happiness and peace apart from himself, because it's not there. There is no such thing. That is the key to history. Terrific energy is expended. Civilizations are built up. Excellent institutions designed. But each time something goes wrong, some fatal flaw always brings the selfish and cruel people to the top, and it all slides back to misery and ruin. In fact, the machine conks. It seems to start up all right and runs a few yards, and then it breaks down again. They are trying to run it on the wrong juice. That is what Satan has done to us humans." Unquote. These selfish and cruel, yet often cool and popular people we all somehow come to envy and worship, who we even seek to be with all our hearts. We sheep being too afraid to fight because of the same selfishness, this living out of fear and thus out of selfish seekings of self-preservation, the polar opposite of selflessness, whilst deflecting and denying not only our pains, our disappointments and dissatisfactions, but also our vices, mistakes, pitfalls, shortcomings, and hypocrisies, deflecting that we are a direct reflection of the entire status quo, thus deflecting and denying that we as a society are in fact as lost and tainted, owned by the darkness as we in fact are. Rather than open our eyes and fight, awakening from our willful state of slumber, naivety, as we should, we instead adapt, conform, and attempt to blend in with the crowd, with groupthink and group opinion, no matter how ignorant, in order to feel safe and secure, aka selfish seekings of self-preservation, whilst living shamefully, though perceptibly happily. Lewis clearly had his head in all the right places. He wasn't afraid to dig deep into himself and to call out his own flaws, flaws which even the saints among us presently clandestinely embody. And the way I see it, following Lewis's superb example starts by opening our eyes to the truth that the world is presently owned by the darkness, and that humans, in all our selfish seekings of self-preservation, fail to accept this truth out of willful naivety because we'd simply rather live perceptibly happy than fighting back against the darkness that presently enslaves us. We'd rather deflect and deny that even those of us that have lived perceptibly perfect lives have fallen and been foul, placed an intentional blind eye to, or condoned and facilitated fouling towards others out of selfish seekings of self-preservation. Thus, until we become honest with ourselves, we will continue to fall as a society.